नमस्कार दोस्तों, मैं हूं सचिन और आपका मेरे यूट्यूब चैनल पे बहुत बहुत स्वागत है। दोस्तों, आज हम इंग्लिश लिटरेचर की सबसे रीसेंट एज की बात करने जा रहे हैं, जिस एज का नाम है मॉडर्निज्म और द मॉडर्न एज। जिस एज की शुरुआत होती है 1901 में और इसकी एंडिंग होती है 1945 में। इस एज को कुछ लोग या कुछ हिस्ट्री बुक्स में आपको द 20th सेंचुरी लिटरेचर कह के भी पुकारा जाएगा, वो भी बिल्कुल सही टर्म है। तो आप इस एज को द 20th सेंचुरी लिटरेचर भी कह सकते हैं। तो चलिए दोस्तों, अब इस एज के यानी कि मॉडर्निज्म या फिर मॉडर्न एज के कुछ हिस्टोरिकल फैक्ट्स जान लेते हैं। सो इट वॉज द टाइम ऑफ 1901 व्हेन मॉडर्निज्म स्टार्टेड। सबसे ज़्यादा हिस्ट्री बुक्स में इसको 1901 में ही कंसिडर किया गया है, लेकिन इन द वर्ड्स ऑफ वर्जीनिया वुल्फ इन हर ऐसे मिस्टर वेनेट एंड मिसेस ब्राउन इन 1924, ऑन और अबाउट दिसंबर 1910 ह्यूमन नेचर चेंज्ड। दिस चेंज इन आर्ट, टेक्नोलॉजी, फिलोसफी और ह्यूमन बिहेवियर इज जनरली कॉल्ड modernism. In 1901, Japan defeated Russia. In 1896, Ethiopian forces defeated an invading Italian force. And the sinking of the HMS Titanic was the first maiden journey where around 3,000 people died. Moreover, it was a time of World War 1914. Ezra Pound said that the slogan of modern was "Make it new," means they wanted to create something new in everything. And then the Great Depression was a severe worldwide economic depression that occurred mainly in the 1930s in almost all the countries, beginning in the United States. The timing of the Great Depression varies across nations. In most countries, it started in 1929 and lasted till the 1930s. In some countries, it also lasted till 1932s also. Okay? So that was also very bad thing happened in society. In the 1920s, women secured the right to vote in US. The women's suffrage movement originated in the Seneca Falls Convention of 1848. The people were protesting for the first parliament, the first labor law. ठीक है, so this was the most happening age of English literature. A lot of changes started happening in this age, and people were leaving the old ways, leaving the traditional ways. They were becoming modern, real modern. ठीक है, तो जब भी कोई नई चीज़ आती है, नई एज आती है, उस चीज़ को हम मॉडर्न एज ही कहते हैं। लेकिन इस चीज़ को मॉडर्न एज या मॉडर्निज्म इसलिए कहा जाता है क्योंकि एक ड्रास्टिक चेंज आया था सोसाइटी में इस एज में। ठीक है ना, जो पुराने आइडियाल्स थे, ट्रेडिशनल थे, उन चीज़ों को लोग जो है बिल्कुल पीछे छोड़ रहे थे, और नई नई मशीनों का नई नई मशीनें बन के आ रही थी, क्रिएशन हो रही थी, क्रिएटिविटी हो रही थी। तो हर चीज़ को कहीं ना कहीं एक नया पहलू मिल रहा था हर सोसाइटी के हर एंगल को। ठीक है, तो इसीलिए इस चीज़ को हम मॉडर्न एज कहते हैं। ठीक है, इसलिए इज़रा पाउंड ने भी इस एज को कहा था कि मेक इट न्यू, हर चीज़ को नया बना दो, नए तरीके से पेश करो हर चीज़ को। ठीक है, तो इसलिए इस एज को मॉडर्निज्म या फिर मॉडर्न एज कहा जाता है। And then we will discuss some very important of this writers of this age, and it starts with T.S. Eliot, who was born on 1888 and died on 1965. He was born in America and then came to England and became a British subject. He declared himself a classicist in literature, a royalist in politics, and an Anglo-Catholic in religion. We'll discuss some of his most important works. First of all, we have Wasteland, published 1922. You need to read this summary of this poem, detailed summary of this poem, and if you have time, you can read the whole poem also. It is very famous poem, and you should read it. It has been divided into 5 sections: Burial of the Dead, Game of Chess, 5 Sermons, Death by Water, and What the Thunder Said. Wasteland is in 433 lines with 35 big allusions, and 5 languages are used in this poem. It is a pastiche. Tiresias is the hero of Wasteland, and the theme of Wasteland is barrenness. Next poem we have is The Hollow Man. Again, you can read the brief summary of this poem. The poem's opening lines are, "We are the hollow men, we are the stuffed men." And the last lines of this poem are, "This is the way," and the word ends not with a bang but with a but a whimper. The Hollow Man has an epitaph called "Mr. Kurtz, he dead." It is a line from Joseph Conrad's novel Heart of Darkness, which was published on 1899. Now we will discuss some of his other works. That we have is The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. Again, summary of this poem. It's an ironic song, and J. Alfred Prufrock is the company's name. The opening lines of this poem are, "Let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky, like a patient atheist upon a table." And the other important lines are, "In the room the women come and go, taking of Michelangelo." And one more line is there: no, I am not Prince Hamlet, nor was meant to be. Here the references has been taken from Hamlet, Richard II, and Henry IV. This poem has been called a drama of literary anguish. And then he has written Ash Wednesday. When he converted to Anglicanism and became a British subject, he wrote this poem after conversion. Here the opening lines are repeated 3 times. They are: because I do not hope to turn again, because I do not hope, because I do not hope to turn. And then he has written Murder in the Cathedral. It is a play, and you should read the summary of this play. It is very important. The book is in Elizabethan blank verse. The woman's lamentation as a course has been used here to convey a predestined tragedy. He has written some other works, some other dramas, such as The Family Reunion, The Confidential Clerk, The Cocktail Party. Now we will discuss the second most important writer of this age, that is Rudyard Kipling, who was born on 1865 and died on 1936. He has an imperialistic mindset. His imperialism has been called jingoism. With drum and trumpet, Kipling called upon England to take up the white man's burden by dominating all lesser breeds without the law. In 1907 he received the Nobel Prize for Literature. देखिए, इन्होंने जो है, इनका मानना था कि ये जो हम बाकी कंट्रियों के ऊपर राज कर रहे हैं, ये एक्चुअली हम उनको सिविलाइज कर रहे हैं, क्योंकि गॉड ने हमें ये ड्यूटी दी है कि सारे दुनिया को सिविलाइज करो, ठीक है। तो ये एक तरह से वाइट मैन के ऊपर बर्डन है, और इसी तरह की जो भक्ति है, देशभक्ति है, उसको हम जिंगोइज्म कहते हैं, ठीक है, जो एक्सट्रीम लेवल पे पहुंच जाती है, जिसमें कि वो अच्छे बुरे का नहीं सोचते हैं, ठीक है, तो उसे हम जिंगोइज्म कहते हैं। ही हैज़ रिटन सम वर्क्स. First of all, we have Kim, published 1911, very famous novel, and you should read the summary, or you can even read the novel, it is very famous. The Great Game is the geopolitical control in the 19th century between Britain and Russia for the domination of Asia. Here Kim is drawn into the Great Game. When Lama meets Kim, he addresses him as Sahib, and Kim says, I am not a Sahib, I am thy Chela. Okay, so Kim gets impressed by some sadhu, and then he joined him, and then he, again he worked for Britain and Russia in Burma also. So it is a very political kind of novel, so you can read this novel, okay. And then the next novel we have is The Jungle Book, 2016, very important book. You should read the summary, or you can watch the movie also. The Mowgli movie is based on this book only. Third, we have a poem, If, very important poem. You can read the summary, or even you can read the poem also. It is very interesting and very good also. Published 1910. Then he has written Recessional, published 1897. And then he has written Gangadin, published 1890. And then he has written A Song of Kabir. And finally he has written The Ballad of East and West. Here we have a line that is, East and West is West, and never the twain shall meet. It's a very important line. Next writer we have is E.M. Forster, who was born on 1879 and died on 1970. When he was in India, he was the secretary of Maharaja of Devas. He was nominated for the Nobel Prize in Literature 22 times and is regarded as one of the most successful English novelists of the Edwardian period. He was named a member of the Order of the Companions of Honor in 1953 after he declined a knighthood in 1949. The Royal Society of Literature awarded him one of the first 5 writers Companion of Literature in 1961. The year following his passing in 1971, his last novel, Morris, which was written on 1913 and 14, and which tells the story of homosexual love in early 20th century England, was published. In 1906, Forster fell in love with Syed Rose Masood, a 17-year-old Indian potential Oxford student whom he taught Latin. He has written works such as Where Angels Fear to Tread, published 1905, The Longest Journey, published 1907, A Room with a View, published 1908, The Machine Stops, published 1909. It is a science fiction short story. And then Howard End, published 1910. And finally, he has written A Passage to India, published 1924. This is very important work, and you need to read the novel itself. It is very important. He won the James Tate Black Memorial Prize for Fiction for this book. The next important writer we have is G.B. Shaw, who was born on 1856 and died on 1950. He says that I write plays with the deliberate purpose to convert the nation to my opinion. I'm a typical Irishman. My family came from Yorkshire, of what he called the most completely wasted part of my life. He wrote, I never learned anything at school, but took refuge in total idleness. My parents went their way and let me go mine. Thus, the habit of freedom, which most Englishmen never acquire and never let their children acquire, came to me naturally. Of himself, he said, they tell me that so and so is no charlatan. Well, I am. Like all dramatists, I am a natural born mountebank. And of his superior talent, I know of no man, with the possible exception of Homer, for whose intelligence is in comparison with my own. I have more contempt than for Shakespeare. He won the Nobel Award of 1925 and the Oscar Award of 1925 for his best story, Pygmalion, which was converted into the movie My Fair Lady, published uh, or came on screen 1964. He is primarily famous for his problem plays. Shaw used pleasant plays and unpleasant plays to attack his audience. GB Shaw also had a record of 2 lakh plus letters written and collected in the Museum of London. Now we will discuss his works. First, he has written Widower's Houses, 1893, published, and then Caesar and Cleopatra, published in 1901, and then he has written The Doctor's Dilemma, published 1906, and then he has written Arms and the Men. It is very important play, very good play also, and you should read this play. And then he has written Pygmalion. Again, you can read the summary of this play, very important play. And then it deals with Pygmalion myth. And then he has written Candida, again very important play, and you can read the summary of this play. And then he has written Man and Superman. And next he has written Major Barbara. After that he has written A Heartbreak House. It is inspired by Anton Chekhov's Cherry Orchard. And then he has written Mrs. Warren's Profession. And finally he has written The Apple Cart. The next writer, important writer of this age we have is W.B. Yeats, born 1865 and died 1939. He won the Nobel Prize in 1923. He was a member, the founder figure, and the leader of the Irish Literary Revival. He, his friends Lady Gregory and Edward Martin started a group known as the Irish Literary Revival Group, and they founded the Abbey Theatre, Irish Literary Renaissance, Irish Literary Revival, Celtic Twilight, and Celtic Renaissance are all common words used for one thing, that is Irish Literary Renaissance. He, with his friend Ernest Rhys, founded a club known as Rhymers Club, a group of London-based male poets. It was not much more than a dining club. He was very interested in occultism, a belief in or study of the action or influence of supernatural or supernormal powers. He joined the Ghost Club in 1927. Emanuel Swedenborg and Mohini Chatterjee inspired him. W.H. Auden didn't like this fervor of Yeats, and he called it a deplorable spectacle of a grown man occupied with the mumbo-jumbo of magic and nonsense of India. He was in love with a lady called Maud Gonne. From that moment, as he wrote, the troubling of my life began. She liked and admired him, but was not in love with him. Later, he proposed to her daughter also. So you know the kind of man he is. We'll discuss some of his works. First of all, he has written Easter 1916. You can read this poem or the detailed summary of this poem. And then he has written Mohini Chatterjee. And then he has written Sailing to Byzantium. You can read this poem or the summary, very important work. And then he has written The Second Coming, again very important work. You can read this poem. And then he has written A Prayer for My Daughter. You should read this poem also. And then he has written Among School Children, a brief summary you can go through. And then he has written Lake Isle of Innisfree, very important poem. You read the poem, detailed summary and everything, analysis part also. And then he has written Hourglass. After that he has written Leda and the Swan, very important poem. You can read the summary of this poem, very important poem. And then he has written The Countess Kathleen, The Wild Swans at Cooley, and then A Bronze Head. When W.B. Yeats died, his friend W.H. Auden wrote a poem in memory of W.B. Yeats. This poem is an elegy written to mourn the death of the poet. In memory of W. Yeats, again it's a very important poem, so you can read the summary or the poem also. Now we will discuss war poets. So there was a different poets who were writing poetry on war, and then these writers are Siegfried Lorenz Sassoon. He has written poems such as Finished with the War, A Soldier's Declaration, Sheaston trilogy, Memoirs of an Infantry Officer, Dulls at Decorum Est, Anthem for Doomed Youth, 1917 published, and finally Strange Meeting. Next, war poets we have is Rupert Brooke. W.B. Yeats described him as the most handsome young man in England. He has written a work called The Soldier, 1914. The next writer we have is Isaac Rosenberg. He has written Break of Day in Trenches, Dead Man's Stump, Returning, and We Hear the Larks. Returning, We Hear the Larks. The next writer we have is Richard Aldington. Work he has written Death of a Hero, published 1929. And next we have is Lawrence of Arabia, a biographical inquiry, published 1955. Next writer we have is Edmund Blunden. George Orwell called him the true cricketer, explaining thus, the test of a true cricketer is that he shall prefer village cricket to good cricket. Wilfred Owen wrote on his gravestone, my subject is war and the pity of war. The poetry is in the pity. He has written works such as The Barn, The Harbinger. Next writer we have is Robert Graves. He has written Goodbye to All That. It is an autobiography. And then he has written I, Claudius. This is very important. You should read the summary of this poem. And then he has written The Greek Myths and The White Goddess. Next writer we have is Herbert Reed. He has written Songs of Chaos, Naked Warriors, The End of a War. And then these are not the writers or the war poets, but they have written poetries which deals with war. They are Tennyson's Charge of the Light Brigade, Rudyard's sequel of Charge of the Light Brigade, and then Matthew Arnold's Dovrovich and Joseph Addison's Campaign. Next type of writers we have is Beat Generation. Beat Generation was a term introduced by Jack Kerouac in 1948 during an interview with John Holmes. This generation supported gay relations, sodomy, homosexuality, and metrosexuality. First of all, we have the important writer of this particular generation, that is Jack Kerouac. He has written On the Road. It is a very important work, and you can read the detailed summary of this work. And next, he has written The Sea is My Brother and The Dharma Bombs. Next writer we have is William S. Burroughs. He shot his wife, and then in his novel Junkie, he confessed that he did it knowingly. After that, he has written Naked Lunch, published 1959. You can read the summary of this book. Although if you are the 50 Shades of Grey fan, then you can read this particular novel also, Naked Lunch. And there's a movie on this particular novel also. And next we have is Allen Ginsberg's work. He has written Howl, published 1956, and Fall of America. Next writer we have is Herbert Huncke. He has written Guilty of Everything. And finally we have Lucien Carr. He killed his gay partner and then recorded the entire story in his famous book Kill Your Darlings. Very important work. You can watch the movie or you can read the work also. And later it got converted into a movie. And now we will discuss some of the modern poets. First of all, we have is Philip Larkin. He has written Church Going, very important poem. You can read the summary of this poem. And then he has written The Whitsun Weddings, published 1964. And then he has written High Windows, published 1974. And then he has written The Less Deceived, published 1955. Jill, published 1946. A Girl in Winter, published 1947. Sonnet 14. His pseudonym was Brunette Coleman. Next writer we have is Henry James. He was nominated for the Nobel Prize thrice but never got it. He was born in America but switched to Britain. He has written But Macy Knew. Very important work. You should read it. And then he has written The Wings of the Dove. Again, very important work. You need to read at least the summary of this work. And then he has written The Portrait of a Lady, published 1881. Again, important work. You need to read the summary of this particular work. And then he has written Daisy Miller, published 1878. The Ambassadors, published 1903. Watch and Ward, published 1871. The next writer we have is Dylan Thomas. He has written works such as Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night, published 1951. And Death Shall Have No Dominion. Portrait of the Artist as a Young Dog. The writer knowingly or deliberately chooses this title to catch the attention of the audience. The Portrait of the Artist as a Young Dog. Under the Milkwood, Fernhill, published 1945. Next writer we have is Hart Crane. He has written The Bridge, published 1930. It is an epic poem known as a reply to Wasteland. Finally, we have is Alfred Jarry. He has written work Oberoi, published 1896. The next poet we have is John Masefield. He was born on 1878 and died on 1967. He says, to simple people, poetry is a gift of the gods which fills out and makes radiant this life of ours. He has written Gallipoli. Next writer we have is Alfred Noyes, born 1880 and died 1958. To him, poetry was a tonic, not hard to compound, and people responded as naturally as to sunshine or fresh air. For him, the basis of all poetry is a sense of rhythm, and because it is an unchangeable part of human nature, as strong in the civilized man as in the savage, whoever gives rhythmic expression to the thought and emotion of a people will unite them, as no statesman or philosopher can, in a common fellowship of understanding. He has written works such as The Highwayman, Sherwood, The Torchbearer. Next writer we have is A.E. Hoseman, born 1859, died 1936. He has written A Shropshire Lad, published 1896. Now we will discuss the modern novelist. First of all, we have is Herbert G. Wells, born 1866, died 1946. In his life story, An Experiment in Autobiography, published 1934, Wells tells us rather boastfully that he was born a Cockney. He is known as the father of science fiction. He has written works like The Time Machine, published 1895, again very important work. Read the summary of this work, read the work itself, or you can watch the movie also. And then he has written Tono Bungay, The New Machiavelli, The Outline of History, The Time Machine, published 1895, and then The Invisible Man, published 1897, again read the summary of this work. And then War of the Words, published 1898. You can watch the movie or you can read the work also. Even for The Invisible Man, you can read the summary or you can watch the movie. And then finally he has written The Island of Dr. Moreau, published 1896. Again you can read the summary of this work. The next writer we have is John Galsworthy, born 1867, died 1933. He won the Nobel Award in 1932. He eloped with his brother's wife, which was later criticized. He wrote using the pseudonym John St. John. He has a habit of writing fiction in the morning and drama in the afternoon. Another of his habits was to turn an old novel into a new play by changing names, shifting scenes, and substituting dialogue for narrative. Thus, his Island Pharisees, published 1904, reappeared as The Pigeon 1922. Galsworthy's 30 plays are all of the problem types. Plot or story element was to him of no consequence. Take care of the character, he said, and action and dialogue will take care of themselves. He has written works such as The Man of Property, published 1906, Four Seat Saga, published 1922, Indian Summer of a Four Seat, published 1918, Justice, published 1910, The Silver Box, published 1900, Loyalties, published 1922, Escape, published 1926. Next writer we have is Joseph Conrad, born 1857, died 1924. His full name is Theodore Joseph Conrad Korzeniowski. He believes French is the only modern language fit for literature. Conrad is Salman Rushdie's favorite writer. When Salman Rushdie was hiding, he was reading Joseph Conrad and Anton Chekhov. So he used Joseph Anton as his pseudonym. He has written works such as The Nigger of the Narcissus, published 1897. This is very important. You can read the summary of this work. A Tale of the Four Castle, also subtitled A Tale of the Sea, and published in the US as The Children of the Sea. So these are all the subtitles given to this book. Next he has written Heart of Darkness, very important work, published 1899, and you should read this work. Very short novella, but you could go through it. I think you should go through it because it is very important. And then he has written Lord Jim, published 1900, very important work. You read the summary of this work also. And next he has written Nostromo, A Tale of the Seaboard, published 1904. Next he has written Almir's Folly, published 1895, and then finally he has written An Outcast of the Islands, published 1896. Next writer we have is Arnold Bennett, born 1867, died 1931. He has written The Old Weave's Tale, published 1908. The book is divided into 4 parts: Mrs. Vane's, Constance, Sophia, and What Life Is. Next, he has written Anna of the Five Acts, 1902. And then he has written The Clayhanger Family. It is a series of 4 novels. They are Clayhanger, 1910, Hilda Lesways, 1911, These Twain, 1916, The Roll Call, 1918. Next writer we have is Samuel Butler, who was born on 1835 and died on 1902. Butler was the literary bad boy. He has written works such as Irvine. It is a title made by rearranging the letters of Nowhere. And then he has written The Way of All Flesh, published 1903. He worked for 12 years but refused to print until he died. And then he has written The Authoress of the Odyssey, and he has written also Hudibras. Hudibras, you can read the summary, it is very important work. Okay, so next writer, the final writer of this age we have is James M. Barrie, born 1860 and died 1937. In Barrie's hands, the drama novel became the most readable in modern literature. He has written The Little Minister, published 1891, Peter Pan, or The Boy Who Wouldn't Grow Up, or Peter and Wendy. It is about a boy who does not grow up. Next, he has written The Admirable Creton, Dear Brutus, and Quality Streets. सो दोस्तों फाइनली हमारी एज जो है द मॉडर्न एज और द मॉडर्निज्म फाइनली यहाँ पे एंड होती है। आई होप कि आपको ये वीडियो अच्छी लगी होगी और आपको मॉडर्न एज के बारे में काफ़ी कुछ पता चला होगा, विच विल बी हेल्पफुल फॉर यू टू नेट गेट एंड मास्टर्स एग्जाम्स ऑल्सो। सो नई वीडियो लेके जल्दी आपके सामने हाजिर होंगे, तब तक के लिए थैंक यू वेरी मच एंड हैव अ ग्रेट डे।